There is a great piece at the Fox News website today by Daniel Horowitz. There's a great writer. And I want you to listen to this. It's worth getting into this, particularly given what I've just been talking about. He writes, from listening to the banal musings of inside the Beltway Republicans, one would come away with the impression that we are just 6 Senate seats away from curing all our political and policy ills. These wizards of smart believe that we must refrain from engaging in risky policy battles until after the next election, when presumably we stand to win back the Senate. To that end, they accuse some conservative groups of working to undermine a Republican majority, both by engaging in so-called unwinnable fights and by working to replace incumbent Republicans instead of focusing exclusively on growing our numbers from 45 senators to 51. You hear this from Rove, from Krauthammer, from Coulter, from the rest. Conservatives need to confront the fact, he writes, this is very important, that Democrats enjoy a de facto 75 to 80 seat governing majority on many critical issues. This line of thought obfuscates an inconvenient truth about the state of the Senate Republican Conference and prevents Republicans from working to build an enduring conservative majority in the Senate. Conservatives need to confront this fact that they enjoy, that is the Democrats, this 75 to 80 seat governing majority on many critical issues. And while House Republicans united to fight Obamacare, besides Ted Cruz and Mike Lee and a handful of others, almost every other Senate Republican worked to sabotage the effort. Instead of using their filibuster-strong minority to enable House Republicans to jam the Democrat-controlled Senate with legislation, Senate Republicans empowered Senator Harry Reid to jam the House. This occurred both at the beginning of the showdown and at the end, when Mitch McConnell undercut Republicans by unilaterally surrendering everything to Harry Reid. Only 19 Republicans voted to block Harry Reid from reinserting Obamacare funding into the continuing resolution on September 27th, and only 16 Republicans voted to block the final surrender. Some Republicans claim we shouldn't use this past legislative battle as a litmus test because many members supposedly sided with us in theory but opposed the strategy. But they fail to notice how many Senate Republicans give aid and comfort to Democrats on an array of liberal priorities. When Democrats proposed a 1,200-page amnesty bill, which would have hampered future enforcement and perpetuated lawlessness, 14 Republicans voted for the bill. A number of others were sympathetic to the cause and only refrained from voting for final passage after their phone lines melted down. And once again, just like with the Obamacare votes, not a single Democrat crossed party lines on the issue. Senate Republicans also agreed to confirm all of Obama's cabinet appointees for a second term with very little dissent. And they passed a massive farm food stamps bill with 20 Senate Republican votes. In February, Republicans helped pass a radical iteration of the deceptively named Violence Against Women Act by a 78 to 22 margin, enabling Democrats to jam the Republican-controlled House, which then voted for it too. In March, 27 Senate Republicans voted for a job-killing internet sales tax. In almost all of these instances, every Democrat, even those from red states, stood firm with their party leadership. Meanwhile, Republican leaders such as Mitch McConnell, John Cornyn, and John McCain either publicly or privately sided with the Democrats, creating a surrender faction of the Republican Party. Often they even refused to whip for the conservative position, that is, to contact each of the Republican senators to get them to go for the conservative position, leaving conservatives with no leverage or power at all. The vacuum of leadership has allowed the McConnell, Cornyn, McCain faction to continuously grow and even include many members from solid conservative states. Worse, the default Democrat supermajority is not only built upon reliable Republican votes, but Republican voices. During the immigration debate, numerous Republican senators worked hand in glove with Chuck Schumer, both on and off the Hill, to coordinate messaging and attack conservative opponents of amnesty. During the Obamacare showdown this past month, one after another, Republican senators went to the Senate floor not to denounce Harry Reid or Barack Obama, but to denounce fellow Republicans and echo Harry Reid's talking points. When the Senate was voting on the nomination of Todd Jones, of Fast and Furious fame, for director of the ATF, Senator McCain was seen on C-SPAN whipping up votes for Democrats. Taken as a whole, roughly half of the Republican conference could be counted on to join the United Democrat caucus on many major policy issues. So with recent history in mind, does anybody really think that a bare minimum Senate majority of 51, built upon the same members with Mitch McConnell as the leader, will produce better results for conservatives? Even in the best case scenario, Democrats would have a robust and united filibuster-strong minority in 2015, and the 20 to 25 Republicans who empower Harry Reid and Chuck Schumer this year will continue to do so after 2014. Furthermore, Mitch McConnell has already promised he will never engage in brinksmanship to force a fight over Obamacare. So given that Obama will still be president, even after the midterm elections, a Mitch McConnell-led majority of Republicans in the Senate, built upon quicksand, will never force even partial delay of the Obamacare law. The only way to build an enduring majority is to elect game-changing conservatives, especially in our most conservative states, to join the ranks of the few unwavering fighters. Much like the Democrat majority, which is built upon solid progressives from blue states and surreptitious progressives from other states, an enduring conservative foundation with a clear and united message can challenge the Democrats and actually win. But that would require changing the status quo and challenging the current failed Republican leadership. In other words, that would require change in principle. I think he's right on. I think if you think that if there are 51 Senate Republicans, that all of a sudden Mitch McConnell and John Cornyn, John McCain, and the rest are going to make it their mission to repeal and or defund Obamacare, that you're being horribly misled. I know I pointed out several weeks ago that Obamacare is here to stay. In one form or another, it's here to stay. Don't blame me. You can blame them. This battle on the continuing resolution, this battle on the debt ceiling, these were the battle lines. And they shot our guys in the back politically. And they're still out trying to smear them. Because the truth is, I know this hurts, the Republican Party as an institution in Washington, D.C., I'm not talking about localities and states. I'm talking about what's going on in Washington, D.C. They have no intention of eliminating Obamacare. Oh, they'll adjust it, play with it on the margins, try and introduce something that may not compete against it, but complement it and so forth. But the fact of the matter is, the leadership and the majority, they're not interested. They're not interested. This gets back to my prior hour and a half where I'm explaining that if you don't promote constitutionalism, if you're not mindful of our founding heritage, if you think the world began with the New Deal, then you get accustomed to it. You become lazy. Just another big government program that, if we Republicans get in control, we can manage. And what Daniel Horowitz is pointing out is just look at their votes. No, it's not to say they would have introduced Obamacare. I don't believe that either. It didn't get a single Republican vote, but now it's here. Well, listen to them. John McCain, it's the law of the land. Boehner said the same thing. It's the law of the land. This is what they believe. This is what they think. The point is, folks, they're not conservatives. This isn't a purity test, no. But they're not even in the ballpark. They're not conservatives. I'm not sure what they are, but they're not conservatives. They're not constitutionalists. Which is why they've unleashed their bagmen like Karl Rove and the others and the people at the Chamber of Commerce in Washington to attack us, to go after our candidates, because they can't tolerate dissent. Even though we control nothing, you and me, we control nothing. They can't tolerate dissent. I think over time, more and more people who really inform themselves and think about these things are going to realize that there's really one course of action to address this, and that is through the state legislatures. And no, it won't happen overnight, but at least it can happen, as opposed to now, where we're up against a wall. And that process, and I put back on my social sites, that process begins with you talking about it at Thanksgiving, talking about it at Christmas and Hanukkah. First day of Hanukkah actually is Thanksgiving. So we're talking about it now. I've put the first chapter of the Liberty Amendments on my social sites, if you want to check it out.